Well, let's expand this conversation and bring in Professor Hennie Strydom, the Research Chair of International Law at the University of Johannesburg, joining us via Zoom from Johannesburg. Thank you for joining us, Professor Strydom. Now, the DRC president was present at the SADC summit yesterday when this decision was made. Why does the DRC want SADC involved in fighting the M23 rebels, and why now?
Well, SADC has been involved there for quite some time now. Around about 2013, the United Nations Stabilization Force was considering an intervention brigade, as it was called at the time. And the idea was to create a sort of rapid reaction force to combat the M23 rebels in the East and other rebel movements as well, especially for the purpose of protecting civilians against atrocities that were committed in that part of the Congo and in other parts. So the SADC involvement is part of that intervention brigade. And that is why so many countries have now contributed to that force. And it still falls, and I think it also performs its functions in liaison with the stabilization mission of the United Nations in the Congo, who's been there for many years.
So what are the implications of having the East African Community Regional Force and the SADC troops fighting the M23 in Eastern DRC, while at the same time UN troops are also stationed there?
Yeah, I think the purpose was to involve countries from the African continent and to assist the United Nations in its task. And I think the true contributing countries have agreed to do that in order to more effectively combat the rebel movements in that part of the DRC. And I think they play a significant military role, a combat role, as part of the intervention brigade of the United Nations.
So there are two issues that are standing out here. And what exactly does the SADC decision to deploy say about the DRC's relationship with the EAC regional force and the UN troops under MONUSCO already on the ground? And who exactly is fighting the rest of the rebel groups if everyone else is going for the M23?
Yeah, I think we must not forget that the DRC has a sort of very important role to fulfill. It is also involved via its military forces to combat the rebel movements, but on its own it cannot do so because it hasn't got the ability. As was said at the introduction, there are about 100 military rebel forces operating in different parts of the Congo, and the Congo is a big country. So first of all, we must not forget that the United Nations was there as a peace mission, and it was mainly there to protect civilians. But as the combat, the nature of the combat was evolving, and the war itself, the internal armed conflict was evolving, it became necessary to redesign and reconfigure the peace mission, the peacekeeping mission. And that is why the intervention brigade was conceived and made up in part of the SADC forces, in order to give it some kind of an edge against the rebel movements, especially the M23, which a few years ago was extremely successful in claiming territory and expanding its military operations in different parts of the DRC. And they were driven back at one point in time. But now, in recent times, it has become strong again. And I think the SADC forces has a significant role to play in combating the M23.
All right, Professor Hennie Strydom joining us there from Johannesburg.